What is the role of religion in our ever-changing world? From the NewsChannel 5 network, this is Issues of Faith.
Hello everyone, welcome to Issues of Faith. We are talking today about an issue that has threatened to divide the Methodist Church. It is one that other denominations have dealt with, and it is certainly very difficult. A debate over gay marriage and ordaining gay clergy. And we want to get into this. It's a difficult topic. Just kind of get a sense of where things stand right now in the Methodist Church. Very happy to have with us the Reverend Carol Cavan Dillion. Did I say that right? Cavan, I'm so sorry. Reverend Carol Cavan Dillion, Senior Pastor at West End United Methodist Church. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Not an easy topic.
No.
There was a big meeting in St. Louis, and the traditional plan was passed. Is that right?
Yes.
Kind of walk us through, where do things stand right now with this very difficult debate?
Okay. So the meeting in St. Louis was a special called meeting. Normally we meet on a 4-year cycle. And in 2016, the debate on the general conference floor, as we call it, got to a point where the delegates said, we need to do something differently, and they called on the bishops to help. So the bishops appointed a commission, a special commission of folks from all over the world who represented different perspectives, and they met over the course of 2 years. And out of their process came a couple of proposals, one of which was the One Church plan, which would allow individual congregations and pastors and annual conferences to make some of these decisions. The other plan was a little bit more complicated, called the Connectional Plan. They presented those to the Council of Bishops. And then, and stop me if I'm getting too complicated.
No, I think that's good. And the
Okay.
One Church plan, it was supported by many who wanted churches to be able to decide what was going to happen. Instead of having the big Methodist church dictate to every church.
The global church.
The global church say every church must follow this. The One Church plan, it would have allowed individual churches to decide. And so an individual church could have said, yeah, we will ordain a gay or lesbian clergy.
Well, an individual church would decide we will have a wedding here. In the United Methodist Church, a person is ordained by the annual conference, so that's a more regional body that would do the ordination piece.
Okay, so individual churches could have had gay and lesbian weddings.
Right.
Okay. That did not pass.
Correct.
And what did pass?
So what passed was, in the meantime, our Judicial Council said that other plans could also be proposed for this meeting in St. Louis. And so there was a plan put together called the Traditionalist Plan that would basically keep our current language, which prohibits gay marriage and ordination, and added some more teeth to that for clergy who disobey our book of discipline and who go ahead and perform a wedding. One of the petitions that passed in St. Louis institutes a mandatory minimum that pastor would be suspended for a year without pay. And then if he or she did another wedding, they would be stripped of their clergy orders, which is a lot more strict and severe than we've had in the past. In the past, it's been sort of up to the bishop of the current area to work with the pastors, or if there's a trial, that's more localized.
There was very heated debate back and forth, and it was a very close vote, wasn't it? It was like 75 votes separated. And so that indicates, I guess, how divided it is. Mm-hmm. Where do we go from here? Did that vote settle it, or what do you think happens now?
It's a great question. So our Judicial Council meets again at the end of this month. And there were certain pieces, so the traditional plan was made up of, I think, 17 petitions in all. And some of those had already been determined ahead of time to be unconstitutional. The Judicial Council said on a first look, these are probably unconstitutional, but they passed. There are other petitions that are more likely constitutional that were part of that whole package. So the Judicial Council will meet at the end of this month to determine for finally what is constitutional and what isn't in the traditional plan.
And so how concerned are you about the church dividing over this? Right now, Washington Post says the third largest denomination in the United States, Methodist Church. It has churches that agree with gay marriage, churches that don't. And now we have a determination from that body. What is your concern now?
I think in the immediate aftermath of St. Louis, there were churches and annual conferences, and even the entire Western jurisdiction of the United Methodist Church, who said we can't abide by what just happened. I think where we are now is not tenable. And I don't know what is going to happen. But there are definitely those saying if this plan stays in place, we can't abide with that. And there are others who say if it doesn't stay in place, we can't abide with that.
You have people on both sides that are threatening to leave, saying we can't abide one way or the other. And again, we've seen this in other denominations. Why do you think the traditional plan carried the day? Again, what the Book of Discipline says is the practice of homosexuality is incompatible with Christian teaching. That's going to continue to be in the Book of Discipline. Why do you think that carried the day in St. Louis?
I think it was a combination, and again, I'm speculating, and all of the votes are anonymous. We just know the numbers of votes, and we don't know how specific delegates voted. But our church has grown globally, and there has been a lot of growth in Africa. And while African delegates are diverse and have different opinions, many of our churches are in contexts where the understanding of sexuality is different from where it is in a lot of places in the United States. So the combination of roughly 40% of the delegates being from the continent of Africa, and then delegates from the United States and other places who also were coming from a traditionalist perspective, I think combined. And it's been that kind of narrow margin for many years, and that's what's been so
And it wasn't
hard.
just the continuation of the practice of that policy. Do you feel like the traditional plan took it even a step further? Is that kind of the feeling that there's some penalties in there that weren't even in there before? So this wasn't necessarily a compromise. This was a doubling down.
Right. I think there's some concern among traditionalists that this is just a boundary that has to be kept, and we need to keep people from breaking the discipline, because there are already churches and pastors who've been doing weddings. There's a bishop in the Rocky Mountain Conference who's lesbian, and that has put pressure on the system as it is. And so I think that's part of what led to the doubling down.
And so you were the senior pastor at West End.
Yes.
At West End United Methodist Church. How was this conference greeted at your church? What kind of questions did you get? Just how did it go at your church when this conference was over?
Well, West End is a congregation that had very intentional conversations about 12 years ago around inclusion, and came to the conclusion through a very careful, prayerful process of discernment that they wanted to have a witness in the community of being open and inclusive to all people. And so over the years, our congregation has grown, and we've gotten more and more folks who are LGBTQ, and there was a lot of grief in the aftermath of this conference. There was grief for me personally and for many of our members, for the denomination to continue to say, you are incompatible, and your marriages are not recognized. And we have several married same-gender couples, and I can't imagine the hurt that causes. So, West End is a congregation that contains many different perspectives, but has gotten behind that welcome statement of everyone's welcome here and everyone is a child of God. And this felt a little bit like a separation from, wait, the denomination's over here now, so what does that mean? How do we continue to be who we are as United Methodists?
And as this debate grew, let's go prior to this meeting in St. Louis. This was in February. Is your church, and I guess other churches, individual churches, how are you represented? How are you making your voice heard? Do you send someone there? Do you think you had people from your congregation that went? And kind of how much was put into trying to influence the decision there in St. Louis by your individual church?
That's a good question. So the way it works is our annual conference, which is basically Middle Tennessee, has 4 clergy delegates and 4 lay delegates that go to General Conference. So all of the churches in Middle Tennessee are represented by those 8 people. Since St. Louis happened, our congregation has been talking about, well, why don't we have a couple of folks be nominated to be delegates. We did have one of our staff members who was an alternate delegate from her annual conference. So she was there and she was reporting back to us, and some of the of our interns who are divinity school students were there on site, but non-voting. They were just present. So we're talking about different ways that we can be a voice for inclusion in the system as we have it, but also make it clear in the community that everybody's welcome.
And where do you go? So there are people that have been Methodist their whole lives, and maybe they don't agree with this, but they do think it's important that the church stay together.
Yeah. And
then there are people that say, I can't abide by this. And then of course there are people that say this was the exact right decision. So what do you think this does then, I guess, to the church? Does it, what are you hearing from those people who are like, I've been Methodist my entire life, but I disagree with this decision?
I have had people respond in many different ways. We've had some folks leave West End saying, I just can't be part of this denomination. We've had others say, I'm going to stay and I'm going to fight. I'm going to put myself up to be a delegate to General Conference. And we've had others to say, I'm not sure where I am in all of this, but I love West End and I love being United Methodist, and I'm not going anywhere, and I don't want other people to go anywhere. So I think in some ways what's happening in the denomination is putting pressure on congregations and pastors to make decisions. And it's when you've got people who come from different perspectives, that's hard. Voting is hard.
What would the argument be for somebody who disagrees with this decision, but to keep the church from splitting? They disagree with this decision, but the church, is there an argument? The church is more powerful as a whole. While they may be saying, I disagree with this, I don't know that I can abide by it, what is the argument to staying together when people disagree so fervently?
Well, we have, as a global church, there's a lot we can do in the world with shared resources and shared systems. And, I asked myself personally that question. I've been hoping for 20 years of ministry that I would be able to perform a same-sex wedding. And I thought maybe the door would open in 2019, and it didn't. We have another global meeting in 2020, so a lot of people are saying, well, let's see, what can happen in 2020. But I think a lot of us are asking that question. Are there ways we can continue to share in mission and ministry, but not be forced to be of one mind on this question? So there are some who are proposing maybe we need a different system of governance, so we don't have to have these global policies that don't work in every context.
Would your church think about leaving? Is that a discussion that's underway, or too early to say?
I think it's too early to say. I think the energy I'm feeling right now is that we want to stay in this and keep working for change, and try to hold together as a congregation and keep in the connection and see what we can do.
Other denominations have dealt with this, and it's difficult. You wrote your thesis on this, your doctorate thesis, right?
I did.
All right, so we're going to take a break. I want to come back and hear what you learned from that.
Okay.
All right, we'll take a break. We'll be back right after this.